Okay, good evening, everyone. Uh, it is 6:02 p.m. Before we begin, I just want to note that tonight's meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Quorum for tonight's annual meeting is 2.5% of the membership. And with a total of 420 members, quorum is 11 members. So far, there are 10 proxies and about almost 50 people, members in attendance. So we have achieved quorum, and I can now call to order Pride Toronto's 2023 annual meeting. We're fortunate to also have with us today representatives of our auditor, Crowe Soberman LLP, Chandor Gauthier, and Parker Holman, members of Pride Toronto's board and staff to assist us with today's meeting, our team of ASL interpreters, our team at Get Quorum, our team of transcribers, and Mahogany, Executive Director of the Two-Spirited People of the First Nations. My name is Grant Gonzalez. I use he, him pronouns. I am one of the co-chairs of the board of directors, and I will be chairing the annual meeting and sharing these duties as well with Leslie Lecan, who is also the co-chair of the board of directors. Osmel Garamains, treasurer of the board, will chair the board elections portion of the meeting. Just going to share my screen. Give me one moment. I hope folks can see that well. We will get back to the agenda because it requires approval, but just to quickly run through the items for today, the welcome, call to order, and opening items, approval of the minutes, the presentation of the annual report and joint report from the executive director and board co-chairs, presentation of the audited annual financial statements and appointment of the auditor, and election of new board members, as well as other business, including one item received after the notice of the meeting was sent out to members, the liberatory demands by Queers in Palestine, followed by adjournment. There will be two 5-minute break periods, one after the annual report piece and the other after the audited annual financial statements. Just running through some accessibility features. There is ASL interpretation provided, and more information will be shared in the next slide. Captioning via live transcription is available. Any accessibility requests, please submit that through the Q&A function for the chair or staff to address. Presentation of motions, the wording of motions are included in the presentation, and any changes will be made directly in the presentation prior to voting so that folks can review it in writing. ASL etiquette, just a reminder for folks in the meeting, ASL interpreters have been secured for this meeting. If you require this service, please look for the interpreters who are spotlighted. You may pin the interpreters to your screen at any time by bringing your computer mouse to the interpreter's Zoom box and select pin. And if you are speaking, please remember the following general best practices. Speak clearly and avoid speaking too fast to assist interpreters in translating efficiently. One person to speak at a time. I'll just say, please don't speak over folks. Interpreters are neutral and abide by the code of conduct. And please speak directly to deaf and hard of hearing individuals, not the interpreter. Sorry, I have the wrong presentation here. 1 second. What happened? One second, folks. Apologies for that. Harm reduction. If you require harm reduction resources, please visit the Ontario Harm Reduction Network at ohrn.org/resources or email harmreduction@pridetoronto.com. If you are struggling with your mental health, please use your phone to dial 988, which is the Government of Canada's crisis line. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Leslie Lee Kam to deliver the land acknowledgement.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Leslie Lee Kam, and I'm here with Robin, my trusty mobility device. And I am doing the land acknowledgement as a Carib Indigenous person from Trinidad. It's important for me to honor and acknowledge and respect the land that I'm living on here in Takaronto, which is covered under Treaty 13. It's a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And we also acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. And I also would like us to acknowledge treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers like myself, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly forcibly displaced Africans who were brought here as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. And we pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. And I like to add a call to action whenever I do a land acknowledgement, that it is important for us to use our privilege to ensure the Two-Spirit and Indigenous people regain the human rights that we take for granted on a daily basis. And I also ask that we as settlers on Indigenous land, again, use our privilege and give to Indigenous people in terms of finance to support them with money or our time, because it's important that we give back since we are taking from the lands that they so kindly let us live on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for delivering the land acknowledgement and for your reflections. I would now like to invite Mahogany, Executive Director of the Two-Spirited People of the First Nations, to lead the opening ceremony and welcome us into the space. And I know, speaking for the organization, someone that we are very grateful to partner with, them and their organization over the last 2.5 years. So I'll pass it over to Mahogany.
Okay. Hi, good evening. So my name is Keith McCready, and the reason why, I assume you could hear me?
Yes.
The reason why Grant is introducing me as Mahogany, it's because it is my chosen name. It was a name I gave myself when I was young. I gave myself the name Mahogany Makwa. Makwa is an Ojibwe word for the name bear, and that's the clan I'm from. It's actually quite important in our culture to know your clan if you can, because it says a lot about your role in the community. Like a bear, I am someone who is quite, powerful, brave, just kind of able to kind of maneuver through life quite fearlessly, but also relies on very little in life, kind of solitude, literally, I mimic the bear by, some of my favorite foods are salmon and blueberries. Literally, I had blueberries this morning and salmon this weekend. So there's something to be said about how there's actual direct connection to part of our clan. But a bear hibernates. A bear doesn't really want to be active all the time, and understands when it's time to prepare and get ready for hibernation. So there's this kind of stocking up and thinking of the future. Bear is really connected to their family, their cubs, very protective. But also knows to take what they need and kind of give back for us, the harmony of our communities. So I'm from a small reservation called Beejahtwabek-Zagin-Anishinaabeg. It's in Northern Ontario, a really small reservation. It was a place that, my parents, where my mother was from, and I was kind of raised up until when I was in high school. And I'm quite aware of what some people might have thought what a ceremony is, but I don't do ceremony in the official kind of very culturally specific way. But I thought I could still kind of give a story about where I am in this relationship with Pride Toronto, but also myself and the land. I actually lit a smudge. I'm here in my office. I lit a smudge. In our smudge, I added some sweet grass. I added a little bit of tobacco, and I added some sage. I didn't add any cedar, as I didn't think it was needed today. And I lit it because I'm thinking about our relationship with Pride Toronto, our relationship with the queer community, and my specific relationship as an executive director with the agency. And I actually thought about a lot, coming into this meeting. I'm actually here because of the relationship that I've created with Kojo, with Grant, with Leslie. Shout out to Leslie, one of my favorite people in this room. And I think it's really important because when you build relationships and you get to know people and you could appreciate each other, you're going to listen to each other differently. You're going to understand different perspectives. I understand that Pride Toronto has many competing priorities. There's a lot of equity-seeking groups, equity-demanding groups, equity-deserving groups, including the Two-Spirit people. And that's a big responsibility. And I have a lot of respect for someone who could step up and say, I'm willing to take that. Because with that, it takes, with that responsibility, it takes a lot of criticism, it takes a lot of openness to be able to listen to different people who aren't necessarily appreciative of all of those things that you have to consider when you make decisions. And so I actually have a lot of respect for this leadership who stepped up and said, yes, I'm willing to do that. Knowing some of the missteps that have happened in the past, and I've been alongside some of those missteps. I was in a room where it was quite traumatizing when we as Indigenous people were trying to say that things are wrong. This was a few years ago, and we weren't heard directly by some of the management. But I also know that people, when there's different leadership, there's different opportunity for change. And it's what Kojo brought to us as Two-Spirited people of the First Nations, and said, we would love to do things in a meaningful way. We'd love to do things in a way that services the Indigenous and Two-Spirit community. And we'd love to do it the way that you think. And the first thing I said was, well, we don't want you to, we don't want to work with you, just give us the money. And to me, that's saying that's the number one thing in my opinion, to say, yes, I understand. And yes, it has nothing to do with our brand and our logo and our saying this is patting ourselves on the back. It's my way of saying we need to ensure that things are done in the right way. And I have that responsibility. I have that understanding. I have that relationship with our community. And so it was really important for me to say that. And once they did, then I'm like, okay, now we could have conversations about how things could be different. We actually engaged with the Two-Spirit community and said, do you want us to have any relationship with Pride Toronto? And it wasn't consensus. It was many people did. And the people that spoke up were quite enthusiastic about it, really appreciated Pride, really appreciated what it meant to them. Most people that we spoke to really thought about Pride as the Pride Parade, the Pride Weekend. That's what it meant to them. And we talked about how there's many more things that Pride does. So as we learned and grew, every year we had to reevaluate like what there was missteps along that journey, whether best intentions or not, there's always going to be mistakes. But understanding and learning beside each other and having that respect. One of the first things I told Kojo and people who listened to me from Pride was, you have to be there. Community needs to see you in community. How can you be part of community if you're not there? How can you be part of community if you're looking from the outside? And I'm really proud to say that they listened. I've seen Leslie at many events that include Two-Spirit people, our Indigenous people, our community, and Grant and Kojo and others. And to me, it really was something very meaningful. At our powwow, while we're doing setup, seeing people help us carry chairs and set up table. Those are tasks that are, when you do tasks like that, you demonstrate people that we're all equal, that no one is above any task. I am an ED, so I don't carry chairs and lift tables. This is not even my event. It's what community does. And so all of those things were quite meaningful in building and securing and strengthening those relationships. And I'm quite aware of how some people might not be happy with things that have happened. And I stand here saying, I really think we have to kind of look at, what's happening in the world. We know all the things that are happening in the world, the injustices to a lot of queer folks, trans folks, people that we love, our families that aren't necessarily might not be here on Turtle Island. And really think about how a lot of the people in this room are here because they have the best intentions and they have good hearts and they care about our community. And so I encourage people to think of that when you're frustrated. Think of that when you think, I don't think that they made the right decision, or that things aren't going the way that I like. Because no matter what, it's going to be impossible to do the things that everyone wants and everyone thinks. And so it's really about communicating in a meaningful way, demonstrating the need, because that's some of the things that we have to listen to as people who are put in positions where we lead groups of people. So I want to sit here today and say, I remember my first Pride as an Indigenous man. I had to save my flight to come from Thunder Bay and fly to Toronto. I actually had to hustle to find someone's bed to sleep in and because I couldn't afford a hotel. And I remember the first time I walked on Church Street during Pride and how I felt safe. How I felt like it was amazing that there were so many other people like me. And so I think those are the kind of things we need to focus on versus the kind of missteps or the things that we don't like or the decisions we don't really appreciate. And remember that there's many of us that we have to consider that it's about community versus our individual needs. Sometimes we have to put those needs first. So I'm not even sure what Pride Toronto wanted for me today, but I think I'm content with that. And I would love to be able to observe and participate if I'm needed. I want to let people know part of my Two-Spirit gifts I was given is intuition, is mediation, is mentorship, is leadership, and is healing. And so I think those all are quite wonderful skills that could be helped. And as a 50-year-old man who is on my own healing journey, I'm quite proud to say I'm in a good place, and I think I could benefit if it's needed. So all you have to do is ask. So I'll sit here and wait until I'm asked upon if there's any support needed during this meeting or afterwards. Lastly, I'd love to say our Two-Spirit powwow is June 1st. Got to put the plug in there. Not going to miss this opportunity. And it was really helpful for Pride to help us with the grants in the first 2 years, but this year we're doing it on our own. But that doesn't mean the relationship needs to end or stop. So I still expect to see them there lifting chairs, maybe not at that 7 a.m. or whatever. maybe 9 or 10 is more will be acceptable. As well as being in the parade. As well as, one of my favorite things were the calls to action to change the accessibility for Indigenous artists and people who don't have access to being able to pay for a place in the market for Indigenous and now I guess non-Indigenous ASOs to be there. Not everyone could afford those fees or prioritize those fees. And I think it's very meaningful for communities to have access to all these resources. And I think it kind of helps us shift back to why Pride was created. Pride was a movement, was a revolution. It was fighting a system that's saying you don't belong and you don't matter. And I think giving each other resources and information is going to help us all be stronger. So I just want to say Chimigwach for having me, and I really appreciate all the hard work that everyone here has done, and wish you a great meeting.
Thank you so much, Mahogany, for those wonderful words. And the floor was totally open for you to share any insights with the membership. And really, I think you speaking to the points around listening and understanding, even in the face of some difficult issues, and the importance of building meaningful partnerships and what's possible coming out of that, I think resonates for me very well, and I know with many, and in fact, most of my colleagues. I hope everyone here tonight as well. I'm going to pass it over to Leslie to guide us through our community guidelines and other shared principles. I will also put this on the slide. One second. But over to you, Leslie.
Hi, everyone. So I'm back. So when we have meetings like this, and this is how we operate as in, at Pride, and also myself in my life, we just ask that, we are kind with each other and we take care of each other in this space. We are asking for no bullying, no hateful speech, no acts of oppression. And you can read it on the screen. This is not limited to comments about racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, ageism, ordism, or any other form of bigotry. And we ask for no selling or promoting of goods and services. And I know some folks don't like to hear this, but if anybody is, not being mindful or is being unkind, we will ask you to be quiet if you want to remain, or please leave. And this is once a year we have this meeting where we get together. We give you an overview of what we've accomplished with Pride and what we're doing as we move on for Pride 2024. So enjoy. And again, I can't stress this enough, to please be kind and to be mindful and to be caring and to be compassionate and respectful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie. And there are some other shared principles too, to prioritize your self-care. Again, be respectful to one another, listen to one another, and please stay on topic, be as concise as possible, because we have quite a number of members here who want to participate. And this is not to say we welcome difficult questions, tough questions, criticism, that's all welcome, but rudeness and harassment and personal attacks are not. Just some other housekeeping stuff. Cam and Mike, when a member wants to speak and ask a question, they may raise their hand, and we will recognize them, and you'll have the option of turning on your camera and mic. The general chat is available for members to communicate with one another, but goes a mile a minute. It's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for the AGM chair, for example, annual meeting chair, to monitor the chat. So this is for members' use as per your own discretion, but there are some reminders that are included in the general chat. If you do want to ask a question or raise a procedural point, which I will describe in the next slide, or after the quorum overview, please enter that into the Q&A box. I will ask questions in order. If they are not repetitive questions that have already been asked, and depending on the type of procedural point, they might take precedence over questions. So I will try my very best to monitor that in real time, but I'm also, just so folks know, I'm operating on a laptop, one screen. There's only so much I can do, so I appreciate your understanding and patience. And with that, I will pass it over to Get Quorum for just a quick overview of the functionality of the platform.
Thank you so much, Grant. I'm just going to do a quick share screen here so that everyone has the opportunity to see. As Grant said, if you are looking to raise your hand to ask a question, you will use the raise hand feature, and I will prompt you to unmute. Each device is a little bit unique, so we will try our best to troubleshoot in order for you to have that opportunity to speak. When you join the meeting, you would have had the option to join audio by computer and accept the prompt. You must do this in order for your microphone to be attached. If you're having any difficulties, there is a little menu button or a little menu hat next to the microphone that you can click on to choose your computer audio. If you're having any audio or video issues, you may put them into the Q&A box and I'll provide you with direct support. And there is also just a recommendation that if you're having difficulties, you can leave the meeting and come back in, or click on the Open in Zoom link at the top of your screen. As I said, you can ask for technical support with the Q&A button that is at the bottom of the screen. And Grant will also review how you can submit other types of information throughout the meeting. And we will be participating in live voting today. So on your screen, you should see either an icon on the top right-hand side, or it will already be open to show you that the meeting portal is there if you're on a computer or laptop. If you're on a mobile device, you should be able to see you'll have to go to the email that you joined us with to click on the link once again to open up a web browser. When it opens up that web browser, you do not need to join the meeting again, but you will go ahead and see on either the right-hand side or the bottom of the screen, the meeting portal icons. And so right now I've put a test vote up. You should see that vote button blinking, and then that will give you an indication that the vote is live. Once you've made your selection, I ask that you click the next button in order to confirm your vote. You will also receive an email just now letting you know that you can cast your vote in the meeting portal. Once you have that web browser open one time, it will continuously reappear when a new vote starts. So please keep that handy, or you can have it open on a secondary device. Again, if you're having any difficulties with the voting process, please send me a Q&A message and I'll provide you with direct support. I thank you, and I hand it back over to you, Grant.
Perfect, thank you. Share my screen again. Meeting procedures. We will be guided by Robert's Rules of Orders. We will ask for movers and seconders. Please raise your hand using the raise hand function. I'll choose the first two people. Motions from the floor, new business are out of order. It requires 10 days notice and inclusion in the notice to members for consideration. However, new business for discussion is welcome, and we will include that in other business. It doesn't necessarily need to be listed, but if there are requests, as there was one received after the notice was sent out, we have included that in other business. So just flagging the difference between the motion piece and discussion piece. Proposals to amend motions are allowed and requires a secondary majority support. Again, please use the Q&A box for points of order, which is a procedural question or objection, a point of information. You have a specific question about processes or the content of a motion, and points of privilege, calling to attention things like disrespectful conduct, personal needs. If for some reason, for example, the SL video stream is not working, please flag that for me in text, and I will pause the meeting and you can figure that out. Things like that are points of privilege. There is time allotted for Q&A for each agenda item. I'm not going to read through all of this other than to say, please maximize the use of your time. There are, I'm sure, going to be a lot of questions. Be concise, and that way we can get to as many questions as possible. And if we don't get to any of your questions, please do email the board directly at board@pridetoronto.com or membership@pridetoronto.com. So we have two motions up for consideration. We'll do it one by one. The first is to appoint Nicole Falcone, Dania Niles, Michelle Simeon as note takers for the 2023 Pride Toronto annual meeting. Are there, can I get sorry, I'm just gonna have to open up my participants list. Can I get a mover and a seconder? I see Glenn Knight has moved. And Ruth Noble has seconded. I'll open up the floor to questions. Any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
No, no hands raised, nothing received in the Q&A box. We can proceed to the vote. Amanda.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I'm now going to make that vote live. So again, if you're on a computer or laptop, you should see the vote icon flashing on your screen, or you will see it appear on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're on a computer or sorry, a mobile device, you will need to go to the link that you joined us with, or the link that was sent out saying cast your vote now. And it will go to have a blue box that says vote in my meeting portal. It will open up a web browser that will allow you the opportunity to cast your vote and click next to confirm. I do see votes coming in quickly. Thank you. And if you're having any difficulty, please use the Q&A box to ask for support. So for panelists or board members, you will have to go to your email and click on the link. It will not appear on your screen. So you'll just have to either use maybe a secondary device if possible and open up that email and click on the link that says vote in my meeting portal, or the email that you joined this meeting with. It will take you to the same web browser page. And we'll just give it a few moments while everyone's kind of getting used to this process. If you submitted a proxy, you will not have the opportunity to vote. If you are a proxy holder, you only have to vote once, and it will count for your proxy vote as well as your own. Excellent. Okay, that vote is now closed. And I'm going to go ahead and show results. Sorry, give me one moment while I get that page organized. Here we go. Okay, excellent. For the vote to appoint Nicole Falcone, Dana Niles, and Michelle Simeon, my apologies, as note takers for the 2023 Pride Toronto annual meeting, 55 votes for, 1 against, and 1 that abstained.
Thank you, Amanda. Motion passes. I will now just quickly share my screen again so that we can see the vote or the motion, sorry. So my computer is not cooperating with me, nor is my mouse. One second, folks. This is not fun. The next motion is to appoint Get Quorum scrutineers for all voting results of the 2023 Pride Toronto annual meeting. Can I get a mover and seconder? Please raise your hand. Byron Jr., seconded by Glenn Knight. Any questions? Not seeing any hands raised or questions submitted in the Q&A box. I think we can proceed to the vote, Amanda.
Okay, thank you. So I'm now going to go ahead and launch that vote for Get Quorum to be the scrutineers for all voting results. I've now made that vote live. So again, if you are not seeing an update on your portal, you just have to hit your refresh or reload button. If you're not seeing the vote email, maybe check your spam box. They should be coming from Pride Toronto. And again, if you're having any difficulties, please do send a message in the Q&A box. Okay, we have a minute left on the clock for that vote, and I do see quite a few votes coming through. Still a few opportunities for people to cast your vote. If you, again, are having difficulty, please use the Q&A box so I can assist you. Okay, excellent. That vote is now closed. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. For the appointment of Get Quorum as scrutineers for all voting results for the 2023 Pride Toronto annual meeting, 57 in favor and 1 against and 1 abstain. Sorry, 2 abstain. Not sure if Grant is frozen. Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that. The motion passes. Thank you. Get Quorum is our scrutineers. I'm sharing my screen again for the next motion. There's 2 more motions before we get to the ED and co-chair report, so bear with me. Share screen. Next up is to approve the agenda for the 2023 Pride Toronto annual meeting. That's the motion. I'll give it 3 seconds to just so you can see that. And then I will actually go back to the agenda so you can review it in detail. Before we get into discussion or questions, may I have a mover and seconder for the motion? I see Peter Moira and Eric Hunter, movers and seconders. And then I'll open up the floor to questions and comments. Javier Davila is the first person. Have a request in the motion, so let's pass the floor over to Javier.
Sure, 1 moment, and I will ask Javier to unmute. Javier, if you could put your hand up, I can unmute you, please. Your virtual hand, thank you. So I prompted you to unmute. Please go ahead.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to make an amendment to this motion or to request that the liberatory demands by Queers in Palestine be moved up in the agenda to before the first break. My reasoning for this is that this was brought up at a November 16th town hall for the Pride Toronto board to endorse on November 24th, Pride Toronto, both sides, Israel's genocide of Palestinians, and did not endorse the statement. And then it was brought up again on January 12th at the Q&A, and the board intervened and ended the meeting 20 minutes early. I then emailed the board January 19th to bring this up again, and the Ontario Not-for-Profits Corporations Act was cited as not having 10 days notice. Had that meeting not ended 20 minutes early, I might have had an opportunity to provide a motion to the board. Given all this, I would like to request that this discussion be placed before the break.
Thank you, Javier. Any other questions and comments? Peter, Amara, you have your hand raised. I'm not sure if that is a question, but I'll pass over the floor to you if you do have a question.
I think it raised itself when I was, I raised my hand when I was seconding the motion, then I forgot to lower it.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Peter.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
For some reason, Peter's hand will not go down. So please just note that, Grant.
I'll be mindful of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is in the judgment of the chair that the formal notice of the annual general meeting was sent to members in the form required by the Ontario's Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, giving the minimum amount of time to members to understand what is in the agenda, the materials that would be made available to them for their consideration. I think it would be unfair to move up other business to before the presented agenda, because again, this was received after the formal notice was sent out 10 days in advance. However, the board has agreed to add it to other business. It is up for discussion. It is listed in the agenda. It's the judgment of the chair that the agenda will remain the same in keeping with the agenda that was circulated as part of the formal notice to members. And then I will pass over the floor to Gary Kinsman to speak. I don't see your hand, but I did see your message in the chat. So thank you for choosing both options. We'll pass the floor over to you. But I think you do need to raise your hand so that Amanda can unmute you.
I do see Gary here. I'm going to ask you to unmute, please, Gary. If you can accept the prompt, you can hit the space bar. I'm going to try again.
Oh, I think he's in. Gary, you're unmuted now. But I don't hear you. So you might need to change.
Let me just try one more time. Sorry. Okay, Gary, try again to unmute, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we can hear you, Gary.
Anyway, I'm having major technical difficulties, so I'm not sure what's going on. I'm using a MacBook, and maybe that's the problem. Who knows? Anyway, I just wanted to say that we're in an emergency situation right now with the genocide that's going on in Gaza. And it seems to me, as ACT UP New York City just did, and as many organizations have done, who are involved in both AIDS activism and LGBT+ organizing, they are actually discussing what's going on in Palestine, the genocide against Palestinians, as a central issue for all of us right now. If this is not actually placed earlier on the agenda, it's basically dismissing this important issue and this important struggle. And it seems to me this, combined with closing down the discussion of the board of director candidates once the issue of genocide was raised seems to suggest a significant problem with Pride Toronto actually addressing the concerns of many people in our communities who want us to actually demand very actively a permanent ceasefire and an end to the genocide. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Gary. I take that under advisement. It is part of tonight's agenda, and hopefully we can get to that topic for discussion. As there will be other opportunities prior to other business, I'm sure, to ask the co-chairs and the executive director the questions as well. So although the specific topic is in other business, the questions may also be raised related to that issue as part of the presentation of the annual report. Not seeing any other questions or hands raised. Oops. We
I
can
do
move
see,
on.
sorry, I do see a hand raise from Anu
Oh,
Verma.
perfect. Sorry about that. Anu, go ahead.
And you please go ahead and unmute.
Okay, I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, I want to, of course, support my co-members in asking this question about the agenda item. And it's tied to this question about the quite late receival of information about the board of the new potential board members, which only came last night with less than 24 hours notice. And there's some ties between this question about liberatory demands by Queers in Palestine and the responses by potential candidates. And I don't see anywhere on the agenda where the responses from potential board members will be discussed, because maybe not everyone had the day off today to read them like I did. So it's a kind of connected question, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question, Anu. And just recognize that the board has, at least in the last 3 years, taken a different approach in providing members an opportunity to ask candidates questions ahead of the AGM. This never used to be done before, at least in recent history, until Kojo, myself, my colleagues in the board joined to give that opportunity. So, and then I believe Osmel and Troy, the co-chairs of the recruitment committee, provided candidates the opportunity to answer the questions in writing, which were circulated by email. I hope you recognize that all of us are volunteers. We need our own time as well to respond to questions. And so I do know that the notice, or excuse me, the responses were circulated out to members. I know it's not ideal that it was a day before, but we don't get paid to run for office. Folks need the time to consider their answers, but it was circulated prior to the AGM, and I know there's potentially opportunity for Q&A. So I just wanted to address that piece. Javier Davila, I think you have your hand raised, so I'll pass it over to you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I just wanted to note that this is a motion to amend the agenda and the order of the agenda. Is the chair able to rule unilaterally here?
Yes, the chair can rule to refuse that amendment, given that notice was given to members with the order of business and the matters of business before them. So as the board, as you have requested addition to the agenda of the board, we have added it to the agenda. It is there for discussion, whether it happens at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 8:30. There will be time for it, but if we're going to continue this discussion about the agenda, we're not going to get to that item at all. So I want to make sure we're using efficient use of our time so that we're able to give you the space, as we did last year on other items that you brought up, so you can engage with members, with the board, with the ED on these questions. But if we're going to continue asking to move it up and then challenge the chair on it and move things around, we're never going to get to the matters of business that members were informed of 10 days prior of what was on the agenda for the annual meeting. I know there are other questions related to things like a recent CBC report that came out. How we're going to be able to answer those questions as well. I know we're ready to answer those questions, So my recommendation to the membership is let's approve the agenda so we can get through the matters of business that are listed here, including the listed item in a, excuse me, in other business.
Thank you, Javier.
With that, we're going to move to approval of the agenda. So we'll launch the motion.
Yes, sorry, we already got movers and seconders, correct?
Yes, we did.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that vote for the approval of the agenda. It should appear on your meeting portal page now. Again, if you are not seeing it, just hit refresh or reload in order for the new question to come up. Excellent. We have 1 minute left in the vote and just a handful left of participants, members that can cast their vote. Okay, the vote has now ended. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. For the approval of the agenda for the 2023 Pride Toronto Annual General Meeting, 46 votes in favor, 8 against, and 2 abstain.
Thank you, Amanda. The agenda is approved. Final housekeeping item for approval are the minutes, which were circulated as part of the meeting notice. I'll just share my screen again so you can see. Oh, the mouse doesn't like this. There we go. Nope, that's okay. Here it is, to approve the minutes of the 2022 Pride Toronto Annual Meeting held on February 16th, 2023. Can I first get a mover and seconder before we proceed to perfect? Glenn Knight moves and Robert Chevalier seconds. Discussion, questions? Gary Kinsman, go ahead.
So Gary, I'm going to prompt you to unmute, please. Sorry, Gary, I see you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. I'm going to try that again. Please go ahead and unmute.
Try it again. Is it working?
Yes.
I was not actually trying to speak about this. I'm just having so many technical difficulties. I think there's lots of mistakes in the minutes, but I will just let that pass so we can get to important discussions, including around Palestine.
Thank you.
Because that is the world emergency that we're all facing right now. And if this organization will not address it, there's something really wrong with it.
Thank you,
Thank
Gary.
you, Gary.
We can proceed on to the vote now.
Excellent. That vote is now going live. It should be live on your screen now. Please go ahead and cast your vote for the approval of the minutes of the annual meeting of members held on February 16th, 2023. Okay, we have 1 minute left for this vote. Excellent. That vote has closed. I'm going to go ahead and share the results. For the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on February 16th, 2023, there are 51 votes in favor, 4 against, and 12 abstain.
Thank you, Amanda. The motion passes. The minutes are approved. I will pass it now over, well, myself, co-chair Leslie Lee Kam, co-chair as well, but first and foremost, I will pass the floor over to Kojo Modeste, Executive Director, for the annual report and joint report for the ED co-chair and co-chairs. Go ahead, Kojo.
Thank you, Grant, and good evening, everyone. And just want to acknowledge the land that I am currently on. So again, the folks would have received the report, which sort of highlight my report and the ED report, but I just really wanted to highlight a few things. And, you know, I will start off by saying 3 years, November 2020, when I took on the role of Executive Director for Pride Toronto, I knew certainly that it would not be an easy task. I knew that I was not going to be on a road that's paved and ready, you know, for smooth sailing, but I took on the responsibility. And I must say that where we are today, I can see light at the end of the tunnel. I am happy to be working with a dedicated staff team, a board, but also a membership that have held my feet and the feet of other staff and board members to the fire. Just really want to highlight a few things. You know, we came in and KPMG was brought in to do a compliance audit. Out of that, or on their own doing, Canadian Heritage has done an audit. You will see, and in our audit, that we have to pay back close to just a little bit over $500,000. Yes, it hit hard. But you know what? We have learned. And I can assure you that over the years that I have been with this organization, the systems that we have put in place is to ensure that this does not happen again. I am happy about our international work. We have launched our International Impact Fund, which saw us this year invest in queer organizations from the Caribbean to Africa to Asia and South and Central America, the Middle East, in supporting the work that they're doing. The work that we're doing with Indigenous community. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with Two Spirits Toronto and with Indigiquare that will ensure that no one will replace them at the front of the parade. This is the kind of commitment that I have given to the membership, and it's what I want to make sure happens, continue to happen under my watch. Pride Toronto led the fight. We saw the attacks that were coming on the 2S LGBTQ community, and we led the fight, which secured $1.5 million for prides and queer organizations across this country to be able to stay safe. We are continuing to make history as one of the largest prides in the world. We're the largest in North America and the second largest in the world. Folks, this takes a lot of dedication. It takes a lot of time and a lot of commitment. And this is something that I am committed to. And I'm really looking forward to what the future holds for this organization as we continue to fight. You know, when I say pride is more than just a celebration, it is equally party as it is protest. This is the kind of work that is ahead of us, to fight that right-wing agenda. And I'm happy to be doing that with the board, staff, and members of Pride Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you, Kojo. Leslie, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thanks, Kojo. And I'd also like to say thanks to Mahogany for that amazing opening and welcoming. Thank you so much. I am proud to be a volunteer with Pride Toronto, a board member, and a co-chair. And I joined Pride Toronto for a reason, to make change happen. And as Kojo said, with my colleagues on the board, the folks who are coming forward to join the board, and I am actually running again for the board, working with the staff team and working with the volunteers. This is the organization that I have chosen to give my time to. And the work that we are doing is incredible. We are doing grassroots work. I hear people out there saying to me, oh, you know, you're a capitalist organization. You're dealing with corporations. You're not really dealing with communities. We are dealing with communities. The work that we are doing in terms of accessibility is beyond what any other pride in the world is doing. The work that we are doing with Rainbow Seniors is incredible. We have connected with all of the Rainbow Senior organizations in the Greater Toronto area. We are also working with the City of Toronto's 10 long-term care homes. We are working with VHA, Visiting Homemakers Association. They provide us with free PSW attendant care for the festival weekend. We are working with the Senior Pride Network, Toronto. We are working with the Youth Elders Program under the auspices of Buddies in Bad Times Theatre. And another segment of the population that people tend to forget is LGBTQI newcomers from the African continent. We have been doing a lot of work with those folks and supporting them the best way that we can. And we are also now celebrating International Women's Day. We are celebrating Black History Month, Asian Heritage Month. We were, as we said earlier, with Mahogany, working very closely and taking direction from Two-Spirit peoples of the First Nations and also from Indigiquare. We had our first community feast to celebrate and honor the Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And we are also doing Community Connects, where we are working grassroots on the ground with different communities across the GTA. So I would like folks to, just reflect on the work that we are doing the time that we have putting into this organization, volunteers most of all. The board is all volunteers, working with the staff who go over and, above Kojo, who works tirelessly. And this is the only organization that I have chosen to be on the board of, in addition to all the other community work that I'm doing. So if people are sitting here and they feel that they would like to volunteer with Pride, we are more than happy to have you come on board and support the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. And the annual report speaks for itself, I think. So folks, I encourage you to review the details there. Please ask us questions now or by email. I just did want to flag, because it's recent news that you probably haven't seen that Kojo spoke to already, is the repayment back to the federal government for some of those grants where we were not able to prove that we were spending the money, Pride Toronto was spending the money toward deliverables that were agreed upon between Pride Toronto and the federal government. These are our grants from, again, pre-2021. We came into this board to clean up a mess that we didn't anticipate was there. I certainly didn't know these were the issues that Pride Toronto was facing when I joined the board. But I certainly stuck around to make sure that we are addressing it. And we did work with the federal government to support them and provide them as much detail as possible when they conducted their audit. There is more information in the audited financial statements. I believe our auditors will also address that in their item. But I just want to say that it is quite a difference between pre-2021 and today. We're just finishing up, I think, an audit on one of our grants. I forget if it's federal or provincial, but we were able to demonstrate that we are meeting our deliverables based on what is agreed upon between Pride and the government. And that audit came back very positively. So there's been a market shift. We're still paying for, I mean that literally and figuratively, for many of the mistakes made in the past, but leadership means addressing those issues head on and working with our partners to make things right. And so I'm very proud of the work that my colleagues have done on the board, and especially Kojo as executive director, and the entire staff team for their commitment over the last few years. Certainly difficult times, but as Kojo said, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we look forward to continue engaging with you on these questions. So I'll open up the floor to questions. We're a little bit behind on time, but that's fine. I don't see anything in the Q&A box. I will wait a sec if someone wants to. Oh, perfect. Hand raised. I'll pass it over to Tom Hooper.
So Tom, go ahead and unmute, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So Grant, I'm encouraged to hear you want to face this head on, this massive repayment that's unprecedented in queer history. This has never happened to a queer organization. This is a massive sum of money. So I don't see anywhere in your annual report where you address this. I see in the financial statements, it's addressed on page 4 and page 11. Nowhere does it say that these repayments are going to Canadian Heritage. This has been hidden. It's been buried by the leadership of Pride Toronto. So again, I have to be here asking these tough questions. On page 4 of those financials, there's a whole bunch of numbers under this line. That 271,000 was repaid in 2022, 388,000 was repaid in 2023. There's a 400 on page 11. It notes there's 455,000 that's on fixed terms. And then there's another amount of 360,000 that are not subject to fixed terms. The CBC reports 505,000. So which number is it? If we're going to meet this head on, how much does this organization actually owe? What do all of these numbers add up to? And why aren't you coming forward to us with this? Why is it again me working with CBC to get this news out? We find out about this hours before the meeting. This is a failure of your leadership that this is my 6th AGM asking about heritage grants. So let's face this head on. Let's get some clarity. Let's have you tell us directly, and let's see it in these reports. And finally, I think it's disgraceful that this organization isn't standing up for those in Palestine, especially Gaza. Thank you.
So thank you for your question, Tom. I do believe we led off this meeting speaking about that issue without being prompted or asked about it. And we were prepared to speak to it. This was circulated out as part of the notice to members. I appreciate there's a lot of information in the audited financial statements. It's very meticulous, but the information is there and we're going to speak to it. I presume that CBC, you work with CBC, I presume you used the audited financial statements to address those questions. So I really challenge this notion that us as a diverse board that is putting our blood, sweat, and tears into this organization, and you sitting somewhere else, constantly criticizing us for the mistakes that of the past when we weren't even here for it. You've tried to lay it on our feet that we, this leadership, myself, Leslie, Kojo, are to blame for these grants. And nowhere at any time have you clarified that these were issues that materialized prior to our leadership here. So I will clarify for membership that we have taken the hard step to do things like the KPMG compliance review. We've met with media. Media reached out to us today. We spoke with them through Kojo. We're talking about this very issue at this very moment prior to you asking that question, Tom. So be mindful when you ask racialized folks that we're trying to hide things or bury things when we're talking about it before you even ask the question, and creating an unsafe space for leaders like us to do the work. Everyone talks about wanting racialized folks to be in positions of leadership, but then oftentimes folks with privilege beat us down. In fact, worse than others might experience. So let's bring some understanding and clarity here that we're trying our best. We're trying our hardest. We're being transparent. We're doing things like reviews. We're working with the federal government to do this audit. We're speaking with media. We're presenting this information to members. And if that is trying to bury things, then I don't know what the definition is of burying things, because that doesn't seem like we're trying to hide anything from you. With your specific questions on the numbers, I'm going to defer that to the auditors who can speak in greater detail of those numbers. So we'll hold off that question for that piece, because I know that they have statements prepared and remarks prepared to address those questions. Thank you. Next question is from Abuzar Chidari. So I'll pass it over to you.
Sorry, Grant, I think Gary was in the chat first, in the Q&A first.
Oh, perfect. Yes, I don't see your hand up, Gary, and yes, you were first. But please do raise your hand so that we can have Amanda.
Absolutely. I think Gary's having technical issues with the hand raise, but I've got him here. Gary, I'm prompting you to unmute.
I did unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Well, I thank everyone for speaking. I know things are getting a bit heated. I am not going to talk about the past. I'm going to talk about the historical present that is currently going on. And that there's two issues I want to raise. The first one is around what Kojo said about getting more funding for security and the police and protection. This actually produced a whole bunch of problems at the Pride Toronto Trans March last June. And I'll just go through a few of them. I don't want to go into a lot of detail. It's a bit amazing to me that people haven't been talking about this in a more self-critical fashion. But I was one of the 20 people who volunteered from No Pride in Policing Coalition and Abolitionist Pride to make sure that there were no anti-trans fascists or right-wingers or Christian fundamentalists who tried to disrupt the Trans March. And luckily there weren't, but there were police everywhere. And I'll just mention a couple of things that happened. The police went into the crowd on numerous occasions to take individual photos of people and videotape of people. So you have to think of how does that threaten lots of the people who were there? Well, it certainly does. So this is unacceptable behavior on the part of the police, and Pride Toronto needs to do something about it. At the very beginning, there was a police cruiser and a lot of police at the front of the march. It meant that the Indigenous drumming group felt totally unsafe as Indigenous people there, and they had to leave. Okay, so the Pride Toronto Trans March was actually unsafe because of an overpresence of the police. The final thing I'll mention is the head marshal for Pride Toronto, when there were a number of people who raised concerns about this and started to chant against the police presence, they were told through a megaphone by this head marshal to leave the march. That is also unacceptable behavior. This was gender diverse and trans people who were actually being told to leave the march. So there were lots of problems produced by the incredible police presence. Safety for us is actually going to be community-based safety, as we've enacted and shown on numerous occasions, including at the Fort York Public Library. It's never the police, it's always us who defend drag performers and to defend trans people. The final thing I'll mention is Brian DeMattos. I am very glad that he's mentioned in the report from Leslie and Grant. I'm really, really glad. I'm glad that there's a room in the Pride office that is named after Brian, but it is, I mean, I have to say this, it is really, I almost want to cry because Brian was a friend of mine and I knew him for years, right? That his last request from Pride Toronto was totally refused by Pride Toronto shortly before his death. It was to actually have harm reduction and safe injection drug use available on site. Now, Pride Toronto informed him that was not possible. Zoe Dodd, one of the major harm reduction workers in this city, said that there are ways in which that could easily have been done. So I also want people to recognize that while we honor Brian, and it's really important to honor Brian and his contributions, that Pride Toronto actually did a major disservice to him before he died. Thank you.
Before I pass the mic over to Kojo to maybe address the question about the Trans March, Gary, I just wanted to, and thank you for bringing up Brian. I mean, it goes without saying that our team misses him very dearly. He was a very engaged member of the board and member of the community after, and we stayed in touch after his service on the board. With respect to the safe injection site, it's not that we don't want to do that, but as you can appreciate, there are certain requirements that need to be met in order to be able to deliver that. Now, recognize the timing of when this was requested was after June with minimal time to plan. And it makes no sense for any organization to do something so important, but you know, we want to make sure something like this is safe and that we have the capacity to deliver it safely as intended. And unfortunately, Gary, I really just don't believe a month, or it was actually, I think, less than a month, to be able to do that or to be asked to do that was just simply not feasible. There aren't many safe injection sites in Toronto. I've seen some of the requirements that need to be met in order to make those a reality. And as a result, there are a few places. There should be more, but all to say that it is very difficult for organizations, any nonprofit organization for that matter, including Pride, to be able to sustain something like that. If there's more information, please do share with us. We certainly welcome additional information so that we can explore and give enough timing as possible to plan if this is something that is possible. But I can't make that commitment now because we know at the time in June, based on what the requirements were to host a site like this, that it was not possible, no matter what our intent was to do it or not do it. But I do thank you for that question. It's an important one. I'll pass it over to Kojo to answer some of the other questions related to the police.
Thank you, Grant. And just before, I just want to really acknowledge one group that I missed to highlight is our amazing volunteers. Over 500 volunteers putting in, over 3,000 hours to this organization year round. They're a key part of the organization. So I really want to give a shout out and to say a huge thank you to them. In relation to the Trans Rally, and Gary, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to thank you, and I'm going to thank your organizations and your groups that stepped up to support the Trans and the Dyke Rally. We were meeting at HQ, and you offered, we jumped on it, and we took it. And in fact, just today, one of the staff, the manager for community engagement, Dania, came in to ask, hey, do you think Gary and the team will be willing to offer this service again? But Gary, I think it's really important that when we put out our statements, that we give context. And I want to take 30 seconds to really explain to folks what happened. We had over 30,000 folks on the street for the Trans Rally. There were two errors that happened. One, the rally started without Bloor Street being closed. The police that were there, which were not guests of Pride Toronto, they were there. We did not ask them to be there. We have no control over which streets they're on, but they felt that it was necessary to direct the traffic to ensure that people's lives are not, cars are in a live traffic. So that was the first intent. When one of the person that was on the megaphone had to say to folks, well, if you're not happy, then, can you please stay away? It's because two folks from the rally came up into my face to attack me physically because I was trying to explain to them that I have made the request to TPS to keep as far as a distance from us as possible. The city councilor's office was doing the same, but it was because of the live traffic. Cars were still on Bloor Street, and hence the reason why this needed to happen. In the past, the Trans Rally would have been, 10, 12,000. We were 30,000 strong. This calls for us to rethink as an organization and really support. How are we going to support? And hence the reason why the idea to reach back out to you, to have conversations with the organizers, to look at the start time, to look at the lineup. Have we grown out of the Church and Hayden area? Do we need to start assembling on Bloor Street? Those are some of the conversations that are happening. And it's happening at the community level. We don't want police as part of any of our parades, in their uniforms and everything else that comes with it. But there are times that they think it is necessary. And unfortunately, they have to take the public safety. We don't agree on everything. But I appreciated, one, that they listened to us when we said, can you please stay as far away as possible from the marchers? And the staff from the city councilor's office can testify to this. They did cooperate. Yes, the siren at the front was not appreciated, but I just want to say that these were the contexts, and it was not just, there was no call for Pride Toronto saying, come on, we need additional police. The funds that we requested, that 1.5 million that you questioned, small prides, large prides, medium prides, were able to access that money to make sure that the festivals that they're putting on are safe. My friends out in Sudbury, or in Sioux, they traditionally never had to hire security. For many of them, it was the first time because of the attack that was happening on the trans community. And we appreciate the federal government for stepping up in such a short time and making this happen, not just for Pride Toronto, not just for Pride Montreal, not just for Pride Vancouver, but some of the medium-sized, small community prides and reserves were able to access it because you know what? When they attack, they were not just going to attack Pride Toronto. And I truly believe that this was a huge deterrence to having major incidents happening.
Thank you, Kojo. Mindful of the time, and we're a little bit over, we're going to go into a 5-minute break and then pass it over to the auditors, and there will be additional time for questions for the auditors. So let's come back at 7:33. A 1-minute call. Excuse me. Okay. It is 7:33 PM, 5-minute break. I know folks are going to start coming back into the space. But mindful of time, I'm going to pass it over to Crow Soberman to present the audited financial statements. And of course, I think my first ask of them, and I believe it is part of their report, is just to unpack some of those questions. I know Tom raised it, and others I know I would expect would have the same questions around the government grants piece. So I'll pass it over to, I'm not sure if it's Parker or Chandler, but either one of you feel free to take the floor.
I'll be starting, Grant, thank you. The questions actually, I think, are going to be answered through our presentation. If, however, any of the members feel that there is something that isn't clear or they have additional questions, there will be a question period at the end as well. So again, my name is Shandor Gauthier. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a partner at Crow Soberman LLP. Joining me this evening is Parker Holman. He is one of our senior audit managers. We're going to be presenting tonight a high-level overview of the Pride Toronto 2023 financial statements for the year ended 2023. Here's our agenda for this evening. We'll start with the audit report and the contents, specifically our 2023 report. We'll then cover off the restatement of opening balances. I think that area will cover off some of the questions that have already been raised this evening. We'll also go through the actual audited financial statements and some of the key areas there, and then some closing remarks, and of course, the question period subsequently. And I do ask, please, if people could hold questions until the end, until we've gotten through the presentation, just to make sure we get through everything, but also it's possible some of the questions will be answered as we go through the materials. So to start us off, we'll look at the audit report itself. I'd like to start on page 2 of the financial statements, and specifically the auditor's responsibilities. So Parker has also pulled it up on screen if people would like to follow along on screen rather than their own copy. So again, our responsibilities are to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement, but there is no guarantee that we will detect a material misstatement if one exists. And there's no guarantee that we will detect fraud if it exists. We are also meant to identify and assess risks of material misstatement and design and perform audit procedures based on those risks. We also obtain an understanding of internal controls that are relevant to our audit. And we evaluate the accounting policies and estimates, the overall presentation, as well as the financial disclosures. Lastly, we are responsible to communicate with those charged with governance on any significant findings, including deficiencies and internal controls that we find during our audit process. I did mention a term I do want to clarify for the group in case they haven't heard it before. The idea of materiality and a material misstatement. So as part of our audit planning process, we set a dollar threshold that's based on a percentage of the organization's total expenses. This is what we consider our materiality amount. Now, this dollar amount is used for our testing, but it's also the amount that we believe to be significant to the users of the financial statements. So if the statements were off by this amount, it could impact their decisions, and that would be considered a material misstatement. So going back to the audit report for Pride, the audit report for 2023 was qualified. It's the same qualifications that we included in the 2022 audit report. And a qualified opinion is very common for charities and nonprofits because many of them receive cash donations. So when an auditor can't obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence over a particular balance, such as revenues earned from donations and fundraising, but it's not pervasive to the financial statements as a whole, it's what we call a scope limitation. So there are 2 scope limitations in the 2023 audit report. One is for the cash donations, and the second is for grant revenues prior to August 1, 2020. Now, the scope limitation for grant revenues is a result of our inability to gain access to sufficient appropriate evidence over the eligibility of expenses for periods prior to August 1, 2020. Now, again, these scope limitations or qualifications were also both included in the 2022 audit report. The last part of the report that we want to bring your attention to is the emphasis of matter. Now, this is used by auditors in their report to draw your attention to something that is fundamental to understanding the financial statements. So in our case, we have included this section to draw your attention to the restated comparative figures or the prior year figures. I'll now turn things over to Parker, who will explain why the comparative figures were restated.
Thank you, Shandor. The emphasis of matter paragraph references Note 8, accounting adjustments on page 13 of the financial statements. This note discloses a restatement to comparative financial information, specifically opening net assets as at August 1st, 2021, government and non-government funding receivable and government funding payable as at July 31st, 2022, government and non-government funding revenue and excess of revenue over expenses for the year ended July 31st, 2022. These adjustments are the result of an audit performed by representatives for the Department of Canadian Heritage, also known as PCH, on the project or grant expenses reported by Pride Toronto. The audit covered several PCH grants, and as a result of adjustments to grant expenses, $505,000 is repayable by Pride Toronto. Of this amount, $503,000 relates to fiscal periods prior to August 1st, 2020, falling under the scope limitation for grant revenues in the 2023 audit report referenced by Shandor. A long-term repayment plan was entered with PCH, which requires Pride Toronto to make repayments over the next 6 years. I'm now going to pull up Note 3, Government Funding Payable, on page 11 of the financial statements, which details the timeline for repayments to PCH. Within each grant agreement, grantors will disclose a specific period during which they have the right to review or audit grant expenses. This period is often 5 to 7 years following the term of the grant agreement. Next, I will be providing a brief overview of the audited financial statements. To start, I'll ask everyone to turn to page 6, where you will find the statement of operations detailing revenue and expenses of the organization. During the year ended July 31st, 2023, the organization had a deficiency of revenue over expenses or a net loss of approximately $96,000. During the year ended July 31st, 2023, Pride Toronto had total revenues of approximately $7.6 million. This represents an increase of $93,000 from 2022. And this increase is attributable to an increase in sponsorship commitments, as well as an increased footprint of the Pride Toronto Festival in 2023, and is offset by a decrease in government and non-government funding as a result of COVID-19 subsidy programs ending in May 2022, and tourism grants that were not approved or received in the year. Please note that sponsorship revenues of $7.4 million includes approximately $2.5 million in contributed materials and services, in-kind or non-cash contributions. Details of this can be found in Note 6, Contributed Sponsorship Materials and Services, on page 12. Jumping back to the statement of operations, Pride Toronto had expenses of approximately $7.7 million in 2023. This represents an increase of $1.2 million from 2022. And this increase is attributable to the volume of in-kind goods received from sponsors, as well as the increased footprint of the Pride Toronto Festival in 2023, an increase in insurance premiums charged to the organization, and increased wages and benefits as a result of staff turnover and new hires, wage increases, additional training and development, and health plan costs. On page 5, you will find the statement of changes in net assets. As at July 31st, 2023, Pride Toronto has net assets or an excess of assets over liabilities or surplus of $1.3 million. Changes during the year include a deficiency of revenue over expenses of $96,000, as previously explained, as well as an opening balance restatement or accounting adjustment of $517,000. This amount relates to the $534,000 decrease in net assets as at August 1st, 2021, offset by a $17,000 increase in excess of revenue over expenses for the year ended July 31st, 2022. And both of these can be tied back to Note 8 of the financial statements, which describes the accounting adjustment or restatement of financial information. On page 4, you will find the statement of financial position. This is a summary of the organization's assets and liabilities. As at July 31st, 2023, Pride Toronto has total assets of approximately $2.8 million. This includes cash of $1.4 million. The increase seen in cash from 2022 to 2023 is attributable to improved collection efforts made by the organization following the 2023 Pride Toronto Festival and reserves held by the organization to make scheduled repayments to PCH. On page 7, you will find a statement of cash flows reconciling excess or deficiency of revenue over expenses to inflows and outflows of cash during the year. The organization also has government and non-government funding or grants receivable of $476,000. This balance relates to funding receivable from Fierté Canada Pride for $250,000, the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport for $125,000, the Minister of Canadian Heritage for $62,000, and the Department of Employment and Social Development for $33,000. Of the amounts receivable at July 31st, 2023, $427,000, or approximately 90%, was received by November 2023. Looking at liabilities, as at July 31st, 2023, Pride Toronto has total liabilities of approximately $1.4 million. This includes the current portion of government funding payable of $389,000. This is comprised of $25,000 in grants payable to PCH, $50,000 repayable to the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport under temporary financing that was received from the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund program. It also includes an estimated payable of $314,000 to various government entities based on our 2022 audit work performed on grants. As at July 31st, 2022, $44,000 of this amount is actually grouped with government and non-government funding receivable, as the funding was not received from the grantors until fiscal 2023. It should be noted that no additional payable amounts were identified during 2023 audit work performed on grants as a result of improved audit documentation for grant expenses. The organization also has non-current or long-term government funding or grants payable of $431,000, and this relates to amounts payable to PCH under the repayment plan with the grantor. The notes to the financial statements begin on page 8. Other than disclosures for government funding payable to PCH and the restatement of opening balances, there have been no significant changes to our disclosures. We'd like to personally thank the Pride Toronto team for their efforts throughout the audit process. Their efforts to improve processes and controls in place at the organization have resulted in improved financial records, and we hope to continue working with them into the future. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we'll now open the floor to any questions.
Thank you, Parker and Chandor. I'm just going to put up, Parker, do you mind stop it or ending your screen share? Perfect, thank you. There is a motion on the floor. I'll ask for movers and seconders, and then we will, I never gets into the slide that I'm on. Sorry. Sorry, folks. I might just have to share it like this. The motion on the floor is to reappoint Crowe Silverman LLP as the auditor of the corporation to hold office until the close of the next annual meeting of the members at a remuneration to be fixed by the directors of the corporation. The directors being authorized to fix such remuneration. Hands raised for any movers and seconders before we get into questions. Charles Pavia moves and Andy Klumpus seconds. Thank you. And then we will proceed to questions. Please feel free to raise your hand. I do see the first question here. Yes, Tara. I think someone asked a question in the chat. Sorry, Tom. The question, I'll read it out for folks. The repayment and note mentions an unnamed federal
Sorry, Grant?
agency. Oh,
Grant,
yeah.
there's actually one before Tom by Michael.
Sorry, yes, Michael, there is a question you've asked around elaborating on Pride strategies to ensure safety and security of participants at this event. I don't think this is the time to answer that question. Perhaps we'll move that to other business. So I'll leave it there to be answered, or maybe Kojo or another staff member can type in an answer, but we'll get back to that. I'll ask questions related to the financial audit first. So just reading the question from Tom Hooper, the repayment and note mentions an unnamed federal agency. Why did you hide that this is Canadian Heritage? Why did we have to learn this from CBC and not from you? I don't know if Kojo wants to speak to that, but maybe I'll pass it first to Parker and Shandor, and then and ask maybe Kojo to speak to that if it requires a follow-up.
I'm happy to answer that, Grant. It's not about hiding information. I mean, the point about having the financial statements released to the members in advance and our presentation and our presence here at this AGM is to allow for additional questions and additional details on the financial statements. We're not trying to hide any information. Just like the board, we are all about transparency and knowledge transfer and sharing. And I'm glad you asked the question, and I think it's been answered as part of the presentation.
Thank you,
And
Shandor.
that I can tell you also as well, our presentation notes, Parker and I worked on them last week and again on Monday, prior to any kind of news being distributed today.
Thank you for the clarification and that answer, Shandor. Question, hand raises. So I'm just going to read them out. Tara Shore, Gary Kinsman's next, but I don't see your hand raised, but I know you did ask a question, so we'll acknowledge you next, and then Frank Teston. So Tara, you're first.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Sorry, it's hard to know because you can't actually see who's talking on screen aside from the ASL interpreter. So I actually have a question about the assets and additional assets. So one thing I'm seeing, I recognize that you want to zero and even everything out for the year end, but it looked like there might have been additional funds, and I'm wondering, does Pride have any reserve funds, or are things endowed? Are there financial plans being made in terms of securing future, or are you literally going up and down to zero annually? Like just from a financial and a governance perspective, it seems wise to have some investments or whatnot to ensure the financial health and longevity of the organization. But I wasn't clear if that was happening through the audited statements. So perhaps either the auditors or someone from the board can speak on that a bit more.
It might be a good question for Kojo or Osmo, so I'll leave it between the two to answer. I see Kojo, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Tara, for the question. And you know what? You and I are reading from the same book right now. That's where I am heading. to ensure that this organization is financially stable. And because we're a festival, and to give some context, most organization, you kind of have an equal spending month after month. Most of our spending happens in May and June. One of the things that I'm happy to report is that 2021, 2022, 2023 festival, we have not had to go and dip into our line of credit. We have not had to do any overdraft, because what we have been able to do is spend within our means. We are no longer at the point where we're spending and we cannot pay our artists, we cannot pay our vendors. Our long-term goal is to be able, like any other not-for-profit, you want to have a solid reserve. And it's one of the things that the auditors has flagged to us last year. Again, they flagged it this year. And they're asking us to asking myself and Amit, our finance manager, to work with the board to put a clear financial plan in place on how we're going to ensure that that reserve is built. We've just brought in a new director of development, and I'm looking forward to working with Nick and to make this happen. So to answer your question, there is a plan that we're going to be putting forward, but at this point, we do not have an investment, but it's definitely something that is on the table for the organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Kojo. Gary, I'm going to recognize you next. If you can raise your hand, and we'll have Amanda set you up.
So Gary, I'm prompting you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Just 2 points, and I'll try to be really quick. One is that, I'm a social historian. So like the historical past influences and shapes the historical present that we're in. So that the grants and the relationships that were constructed with state agencies in the past continue to shape the present. What is interesting about what's going on with Heritage Canada, Canadian Heritage, is that Pride Toronto in the past was unable to actually meet its commitments. And we do know that a lot of the funding that was provided around that point in time was actually to try to get the police back into Pride. John Tory, many other people, like the federal Canadian state, wanted to get the police back in. But there was also a commitment to providing support for Indigenous artists and Indigenous people, which is some of the areas that Pride Toronto wasn't actually able to meet. So this is something that needs to be talked about, because the historical past creates the conditions of the historical present that Pride Toronto exists in. The second thing I wanted to just raise in this context is that one of the major financial sponsors of Pride Toronto is TD Bank. We all know that. In the past, I've raised questions around Coastal GasLink being supported by the TD Bank and the direct attack on the land and water rights of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. And I would continue to raise those. We've been asked by Indigenous organizations to end our relationship with all of the banks that are involved in Coastal GasLink, which is destroying the land and water of the Wet'suwet'en people. I'll just leave it there. I think people really need to think about that. But now it's even more urgent in a certain sense, because we now know that the TD Bank has $16 million invested in General Dynamics, which makes armored personnel carriers for the Israeli military. So that the TD Bank and the Canadian government, by allowing this to take place, is directly involved in organizing genocide against people in Gaza right now. Now, clearly, this is something we'll come back to talking about. Clearly, this is something that I find unacceptable, and I would hope that all members of Pride Toronto would find unacceptable. And we need to challenge the TD Bank if it's not going to remove its relationships with Coastal GasLink and General Dynamics. Pride Toronto needs to break all of its ties with TD Bank, and we need to figure out other sources of funding, because TD Bank is one of them, it's the second largest bank in Canada, and it is also one of the major banks on a world scale that is involved in fossil fuel industries and climate destruction. I'll just leave it there for now. I'm not sure if the auditors want to respond to any of those concerns or other people from Pride Toronto. Thank you.
I think perhaps that's more of a question for Pride Toronto. Maybe Kojo, other board members would like to, I see Kojo on mute, so over to you, and then Osma.
Again, thank you, Gary. And you know, one of the biggest challenge that I have is, you know, we're constantly asking Pride Toronto, you know, to not have relationships with A, with B, with C. And TD keeps on coming up. And this by no means is me, you know, backing TD, but I think it's really important that we also look at the work that TD has done for the queer community. And I have also had conversation with some of my Indigenous elders. I have taken the exact same question to them and asked their honest and frank opinion on this. And one of them looked at me and said, Kojo, if you don't want the TD money, please pass it over to us. The conversations that we're having with TD is ongoing. And I think we need to acknowledge that, you know, Gary, folks like yourself are constantly saying to us, we need to pay artists more. We need to, you know, acknowledge the work of the BIPOC community. We need to, you know, hire more artists from Toronto. Well, how are we going to do this without the support of corporate sponsors? And anyone, I mean, I am open to having those conversations. I do not have, you know, friends and family that's going to write those checks to make sure that our presence are not erased. And this is our goal, is to continue to work with the education that we support TD and all of our sponsors with, to ensure that they're abreast with what is happening in our communities. So I acknowledge that there is work to be done, not just by TD, by many of our sponsors. And this is the kind of work that is ongoing. So I really, again, this is not a challenge to you, Gary, but again, I would love to, you know, coffee will be on me, you know, and we can sit and really to understand. I want you to break down to me, you know, as someone that was not born here, that is leading one of the largest prides in the world. I want to get a better understanding of how you think we can do this. You know, if we get rid of all of the corporate sponsors, we're now saying to all of our artists, our BIPOC artists, our trans artists, that our Indigenous artists, we are canceling you by canceling our sponsors. And that's the challenge that I have. So again, I'm putting out an open call to you for a sit-down coffee, because there is probably knowledge that you have that I can tap into in order to strengthen this organization financially, that we no longer have to rely on corporate sponsors. But what I don't want to hear is that that's not how Pride used to be, because how Pride used to be and where Pride is now is very different. And for me, as a queer Black person that was not born here, I want to make sure that I can celebrate, but I can also be part of that protest, because many of my siblings in many parts of the world and also in parts of Canada cannot have that right.
Thank you, Kojo. Osmel, floor is yours.
Hey, folks. I, Kojo said everything I needed to say, but I did wanted to say one thing, and that was the fact that through the efforts of Kojo and his team and the board from Pride Toronto, we've seen the change from what we kind of inherit to where we are now. And so we can see that through the audited statements and seeing that we have done a lot in the past few years, and Kojo has done from since taking office. And so again, I want to ensure that folks understand that this is not something that just happened, that we're all part of, or some kind of conspiracy theory. I'm honestly tired of that, tired of it. Just because I came on board last year, and for the fact that I'm coming on board last year and I'm hearing something about hiding things is ridiculous. I think at the end of the day is that it shows the work that folks are doing in the office. It's showing the work that we want to be transparent and we want to be accountable. And moving forward, this is I would say where Pride Toronto has been from since Kojo and his team has taken place, and the new board, and is where it's going to be moving forward in terms of finances as well.
Thank you, Osmel. I see there is one hand and a number of questions in the chat. However, there is a motion to call the question moved by Eric Hunter. Is there a seconder to call the question, which takes precedence, unfortunately, over all the questions? Charles Pavia has seconded. So I'm not sure if it's prepared, but we will proceed to a vote on the motion to reappoint the auditors. Can I pass that over to you, Amanda, to manage? And the first motion is to call the question.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Just allow me one moment to get that ready. Okay, we have a mover and a seconder for the approval of the motion to call the question for the vote. I'm going to go ahead and make that live in just this moment here. So it's been a few minutes since we had a vote. So just to remind you that your vote should be flashing your vote icon, or you should see it refresh on your screen if you're on a computer or a laptop. If you're not seeing it refresh, you just have to hit that reload or refresh button. If you're on a mobile device, you will want to check your email for the link that you joined the meeting with, or the email that is saying cast your vote now. You will click on the blue box to go to your meeting portal, and it will open up the web page to allow you to cast your vote. Please be sure to hit the next button to confirm. And if you're having any difficulties, please type me a message in the Q&A box. And there's just a minute left for your vote. So if there are people who are voting for a proxy, if they are a proxy holder, your vote that you cast will count towards both votes, your own and the member you are a proxy holder for. So you do not need to vote twice. It counts automatically for you. Excellent. That vote is now ended. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So this is the motion to call the question for the vote. There were 46 votes in favor, 7 against, and 5 abstain.
Thank you, Amanda. Just let me do some math here. This motion requires 2/3 majority to pass, and it is 95%. So the question is called. Amanda, I'll pass it back to you again to load up the motion to reappoint Crow Silverman LLP.
Excellent. So now I'm going to go ahead and start that vote right away. Thank you, everyone. That vote should now be live on your meeting portal. This is the vote for the reappointment of Crow Silverman LLP as the auditor of the corporation to hold office until the close of the next annual meeting of the members at a remuneration fixed by the board of directors of the corporation. I'm not sure if our interpreter is frozen or if I am.
I think our interpreter is frozen.
Just switching interpreters.
Thank you.
Our apologies.
No problem.
Oh,
Switching back if you don't mind.
thank you. Okay, we have under 1 minute left to complete your vote. Okay, the vote has ended. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for results. In regards to the motion for reappointment of the auditor, there were 62 votes in favor. And this includes advance votes that were submitted. So advance proxies, 62 in favor, 7 withhold, and 1 abstain.
Thank you, Amanda. The motion carries and Crow Silverman LLP is reappointed for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. And I think we can excuse Shandor and Parker. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
There will be another break, but I'm cognizant that we are a little bit late. So in my judgment as chair, I'm going to ask for a motion to extend the meeting to 9:15 p.m. And then after that motion, we will take a 5-minute break. Is that something you're able to do, Amanda? Oh, you're muted, but it looks like you're working on it.
Yes, correct. Thank you. And I'm not sure if you need a seconder.
Oh, yes, yeah, thank you for that. Can I get a mover and seconder? Oh, everyone's already ready for it. Glenn Knight moves and Shima Baraksai seconds. And we'll proceed to the vote.
Excellent. That vote is now going to show up in just one moment. And it was 9:15, you said, correct, Grant?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. That vote is now live. Please go ahead and cast your vote for the approval of the motion to extend the meeting to 9:15 p.m.
As folks are voting, I was able to catch a question in the chat around why the options have changed. I just do want to clarify, this is a new requirement under Ontario's Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. The regulations require that for motions related to the reappointment of the auditor and for board elections, that the options presented to members are for and withhold. That is not something we have a choice over. All other motions are for, against, and a version of abstained. Prefer not to vote. I forget the verbiage for this one, but
I choose not to vote.
I choose not to vote. Thank you, Amanda. So I just wanted to provide that clarity around why some of the options might look different.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone. That vote has now closed. So for the approval of the motion to extend the meeting to 9:15 p.m., 49 votes in favor, 10 against, and 2 abstain. Oh, Grant, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, I am on mute. I was on mute. Motion carries. We'll break and come back at 8:19, and I will pass the chair over to Osmel to lead us through the board elections. Okay, folks, 1 minute call. Or it could be under a minute now. It's 8:18 on my screen.
Grant, can you do me a favor and share your screen? I know it's a bit odd, but
Oh, for the presentation? Yeah, I can do it.
yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, no problem. Just tell me when to move along.
Yes, please.
It is 8:19, folks. So I will bring this meeting back here. Other than sharing the screen, I will pass over the chair responsibilities to Osmo, who will manage the next item of Board of Director elections. Just gonna share my screen here. Hope it works. Slide.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh.
Here we are. Perfect. Over to you, Osmo.
Wonderful. Good day, folks. My name is Osmel Gedamains. I am the treasurer of the board of Pride of Toronto, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of the selection committee in terms of sitting on the board for candidates. I just wanted to provide some information on the folks who are running for board candidate positions. We had a Q&A sessions last week where folks were provided questions. Some folk, unfortunately, we ended a bit early due to my own fault. And due to that, we were able to send out, ask folks to provide their questions, and then eventually having each candidate provide an answer to those questions, which was sent out earlier. So please, if you haven't, take some time to read those questions as we go along. Now, in terms of the recruitment process, as folks know, we've sent out a call out back in late November, sorry, not November, very early November, providing some folks some information in terms of getting onto to submissions on the board. Once that a selection committee was created, I became one of the co-chairs along with Troy Dunn, who also sits on the board. We were able to review a lot of applications, and with that said, we were able to interview folks, and these are the folks that are very interested in moving forward and also sitting on the board. We can go to the next slide, please, Grant. So just to give you an overview of the voting method, so members will be asked to vote for or withhold in the election of each of the candidates as directors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the 2027 annual meeting of members of the corporations, with the exception of Leslie Lee Kam, who will hold office until 2026. We're just going to move it along for a bit. Just so folks know, we're going to have each candidates are going to be providing a quick bio of themselves or a little bit of a presentation. As I said before, these folks already did this last week, but they're going to be doing it again this week, but more of a shorter span. One of the candidates won't be able to speak due to some issues, and so I will be reading on their behalf. But they will definitely participate in question and answers, probably through me in terms of providing them an answer, providing folks an answer to their questions. Or questions, answers to the questions from you. Just to provide some folks folks of who was running, we have Victor Perez Amado. They go by the pronouns he, him. Anmol Butera, they use any pronouns. Grant Gonzalez, who uses he, him. Leslie Lee Kam, who's gender mysterious. Mariana Mota, who uses she, her. And Bibiana Sabitenez, who uses she, her pronouns as well. So we're going to move right along in terms of asking each candidate to present themselves and to provide some information on who they are and what they do and why they're interested in participating in the Pride Board. Just so folks know, we will be timing each folks just to make sure that we are on time.
And who is the first candidate?
Oh, sorry. So the first girl, I'm like looking at it. I'm like, wait, is she gonna press the button?
Where did that go?
I know, right? So the first person we're going to be doing, or we're going to be hearing from is Victor Perez Amado. So we're doing this alphabetically.
Right. Can you hear me and see me? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Victor Perez Amado. I'm an assistant professor at the Toronto Metropolitan University School of Urban and Regional Planning. I'm from Caracas, Venezuela, but I've lived in Miami and Boston as well before settling in Toronto. I'm trained as an architect and urban designer, and my academic research centers on aging in place and aging in community studies for multi-generational communities in Toronto, especially housing for 2S LGBTQIA A+ older adults. I'm also interested in activating public spaces and making them more multi-generational. I've worked with the Downtown Young Business Improvement Area over the past 2 years in creating a better place for 2S LGBT communities as well for the city. What else? I've been doing research and designing housing for 2S LGBT communities, older adults. And that's part of the experience that I would like to bring on board to Pride Toronto, how to reach out to these communities outside the church and Wesley area, and how to bring up front people, vulnerable people that don't have a voice in our city. And with that, thank you so much. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Victor. Just to remind folks, let's please keep this under a minute so that we can definitely provide folks with some time. But it's okay though, Victor. Good. The next person that we are going to be hearing from is Anmol Budhira. I'm so sorry, Anmol, if I am pronouncing it incorrectly.
It's all good. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Anmol Budhiraja, and I'm a 26-year-old immigrant to Canada, settler on the Turtle Island. I'm currently working with Two-Spirit People of the First Nations as a crisis response specialist. So I've been able to learn alongside community and kind of be immersed in the front line to learn the challenges and hardships. Instead of taking this time talking about me, I kind of want to just take this time thanking everyone here because I feel as a youth, I learned from everyone. And I want to thank personally having Keith McCready, the ED of Two Spirits, my coworkers, volunteers, community itself kind of letting me in and kind of learn alongside and kind of be able to give back. Something really fun I learned today while I was talking to my mom was she was talking about how the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself to service. So I look forward to, if given a chance, being on this board to be able to learn from you all and be that sponge so I can grab on the energy and bring something, a new, refreshed perspective from a youth perspective. Thank you so much.
Right along. Oh. Hello, is everybody? Okay. Thank you so much, Anmol. We're moving right along. So Grant Gonzalez.
Thank you, Osmo. Good evening, folks. I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to serve on this board over the last 3 years. It's a very challenging volunteer role, as folks can appreciate, but I am very committed to the people of Pride Toronto, the volunteers, the staff, the leaders, the community that make us what we are as a deeply impactful 2S LGBTQI+ organization, and to continue making us a stronger organization. Spent a lot of time with my colleagues addressing a lot of difficult issues that we spoke to earlier today, but I just want to say that if reelected, I'm going to be putting my efforts into making sure that we're fulfilling our multi-year strategic plan that we finally finalized and approved this year, and look forward to working with all of the amazing talent on the board and the new staff coming on and who have already joined us at Pride. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Grant. And we're moving on to Leslie Lee Cam. Oh, Leslie, you're on mute.
Hi, my name is Leslie Lee Cam, and this is Robin, my mobility device. I am a Jurassic Dyke. I've been on the board already for 3 years, and I've been a co-chair for 11 months. I work from an intergenerational, intersectional, anti-oppression perspective, and my work speaks for itself on the board. If I'm elected, I will continue to give Pride Toronto 1,000% of my time, which I'm already doing. And like Grant, it's a challenge, and it's also very rewarding to be doing this work. And I continue to build the communities. I'm called the connector for a reason, because I am a grassroots organizer, and that is something that Pride has gone back to, is grassroots organizing. And I'm really proud to be supporting Kojo the staff, the volunteers, and the amazing work that Pride Toronto is continuing to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. We're moving on to Mariana Mota.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mariana Mota. I use the she and her pronouns. I'm originally from the northeast of Brazil, pro-Latin American. I've been living in Toronto for the past 5 years or so and fell in love with the city very quickly, diversity being a huge part of that. And I have been working for the city of Toronto ever since. In terms of work, I manage a team of 11 policy and research experts in economic development and culture. My background is in economics with a PhD in political science, and I would be really honored to contribute my skill set and my lived experience to Pride Toronto. Not only is it deeply personal to me as a queer woman, but I believe in the power of coming together and of giving back. I'm on the Pride Network steering committee at the City of Toronto, and among other things, I also co-founded and co-chair a racialized staff network. So that's my quick introduction. Thanks for your time, and I really look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you so much, Mariana. So at this moment, I will be reading her introduction, which is from Bibiana, just because Bibiana, unfortunately, is not able to speak at this moment. But she is currently online. My name is Bibiana Santibanez. I am sorry I had a vocal cord surgery, so I can't talk, but I will be assisted with my introduction. Bibiana is a trans Latina woman who has worked with marginalized communities for over 12 years and specializes in working with newcomers, refugees, and people living with HIV. My motivation to be part of this board is to have the opportunity to be an inspiration for those who do not feel represented and to those who do not feel they belong in this space. Statistics and my own living experience have shown us that the trans population is one of the most marginalized populations among the rest of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. Proper representation will always be a must in this space to create equality in representation. That was from Bibiana Santibanez. All right, folks, thank you so much for the introductions. You have heard from our candidates, and so we are moving on to some questions. Please note that if there's questions that have already been asked before, please note that you could refer to them through the questions that were answered by the email. So please, if those questions already been asked, please don't come and ask them again, just so that we can have other folks asking other questions that may pertain to the candidates. At this point, I'm just going to look around to see if anyone has any questions. Please ensure if you do have any questions to please raise your hand.
Cosmo, there's one question in the Q&A that pertains to this from Anu.
Okay, let me just see that in the Q&A section from Anu. So it says, is it correct to understand that if all of these folks who have put their names forward are elected, the board would then be 11 directors total? At this point, yes, that is correct. Is there any other questions towards the candidates at this point?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, wonderful. So since there's no questions, we're going to move on to the vote. So again, just to go over things with folks. Members will be asked to vote for or withhold in the election of each of the candidates as directors of the corporation to hold office until the close of the 2027 annual meeting of members of the corporation, with exception of Leslie Lee Kam, who will be holding office until 2026. So we will be moving forward with the vote. I will leave this up to Amanda.
Thank you. Excellent. So what we're going to do is you're going to vote for each candidate individually, but I'm going to launch them all at the same time. So what you'll see on your meeting portal is you will see one person's name come up with the opportunity to cast your vote and to hit the next button. Once you confirm your vote, it should show the next candidate until you have gone through all 6 candidates. So we're going to put a few minutes on the clock. If we need an extension, if anyone's having any difficulty, again, if you're not able to see all the candidates for voting, you can hit the refresh button. If it doesn't come back or it's showing you the same vote, if there's any difficulty, please use the Q&A box and I'll provide you with support as well as extend the voting period. So everyone has an equal opportunity to cast their vote. Okay, we've got about 25 seconds for some votes, a majority of them, some are 45 seconds. So again, if you're having any difficulty, please send a message in the Q&A or the chat and I can extend that voting period. But we do see a number of votes coming in, so thank you, everyone. We do have a question whether or not this vote was moved. I don't know if anyone can speak to that. I don't want to offer up an opinion because I'm not a legal representative.
So
So
we
am-
may, if, hi, it's Kojo here. We may, just, Osmel, I'm just going through my notes here. We did, we had a mover and a shaker, sorry, a mover and a seconder. So we may have to redo the vote. So Osmel, if you can, we're gonna have to recall.
I'm so sorry about that. That's on.
Sorry,
on.
Amanda.
Yes, no, I for some it's in my notes. I assume that I actually said that. And so I guess the motion that will be on the floor is that the 2023 or 2024 candidates, if folks are in, Koja, I probably might need some help in this in creating this motion here. So sorry about that, folks. So okay. So a motion is on the floor for voting for the five candidates who are Mariana Mota, Victor Perez, Amado, Anmol Budhidreja, Leslie Leacam, and Grant Gonzalez, and Viviana Santimenez. Please, is there a motion to move forward with these folks in terms of voting for them? I need a mover and a seconder. Just to the question that asked if we can stop. So what is going to be happening right now, the vote will be, we're going to be re-voting at this point, just because the motion wasn't put forward. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so you want to
Yeah, so
remove
let's,
all the votes?
Yeah, so let's remove all votes at this waiting time.
Okay, I'll
And
need a
then
few
we will-
moments for that, unfortunately, sorry.
No problem.
You
And
can
then
do the
what we-
motions, you can go forward with the motions.
Right, and so we're moving with the motion, whether or not to move forward with the votes. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Again, I'm not able to see, so if folks from Pride Office, if you can let me know who is there, if there's a mover.
So I'm going to lower all your hands. If everyone could please go ahead and if you're a mover and seconder, perfect. So we have Charles Pavia and Glenn Knight as a seconder.
Wonderful. So we're moving with Charles and Tavia. And so folks, it's a wonderful night, eh? We're going to start over the voting process one more time. So in case you didn't, get to vote, you can vote now.
Okay, I just need a few moments to recall those previous. So you want me to delete the previous votes and start over? Is that
Yes,
correct?
please.
Okay,
Yes, please.
so one moment.
So at this point, folks, just so you know, the reason why we're taking a bit of time is that we are creating the motion. And then we're going to be voting on for and against this motion in terms of moving forward in terms of voting. And once that is completed, then we'll be moving into the voting in terms of casting your vote.
Okay, sorry, I forgot. I missed that step. So we're voting.
So right now we're voting on the motion of moving forward with the vote.
Okay.
As you said, it was what we're presented in terms of what is being second, and now the motion will be moved forward for the membership to vote on. So we're just getting that together and placing it on screen, folks.
Perfect. One moment.
Okay. Just let me know when you're ready, Amanda. We can move forward with that.
Okay, so this is a motion to approve. Do you approve the motion for the membership to move forward with the vote for the election?
Yes.
Perfect.
And then once that is voted upon, then we will be moving into the vote.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start that vote for the approval of the motion to go forward with the election voting. Please go ahead and cast your vote for this motion. And thank you for your patience while I got that all organized. I apologize.
Oh no, not at all. That's my fault. That's not you.
Oh, it's a team effort.
And so now we're going to be so once we get the results, then we'll move forward
with the candidates.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. So we have just under 1 minute remaining on this vote. We do have a few votes still coming in, so we'll give them that time. Okay, excellent. That vote has now closed. I'll just go ahead and share my screen. For the motion for the membership to move forward with a vote of the election, 53 in favor, 3 abstain, and 2 against.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, folks. So we're going to be moving forward with the vote. Amanda, if you can please place the candidates back on screen and have folks voting towards the candidates.
Osmel, I think we need a mover and a seconder for this motion as well.
Oh. So we need a mover and seconder for this particular motion as well. Is there a mover for moving in terms of moving forward in terms of voting for each candidate for the Board of Directors election?
So I do see a hand raised from Ruth Noble and a seconder from Glenn Knight.
Wonderful.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead. And as I said before, each candidate will come up with their own vote and you will choose your vote and then hit the next button to confirm, and the next candidate name should appear for you. And I'm going to put a little bit of extra time on there because I think 2 minutes for this is a little bit too quick. I believe we've got one more. Okay, each candidate should now be live for their votes. And I do see votes coming in quickly. So excellent, everyone. Thank you.
And so with folks, we're just going to be waiting just for the results once it's calculated, and then we will just speak on the candidates.
Okay, there's still a few votes coming in, and yeah, there's about 2.5 minutes remaining. So again, make sure you're hitting that next button to get to the other candidate votes. And if you're not seeing that button come up, you could hit the refresh button on your web browser. As well, it is recommended you use Google Chrome if you're on a computer or laptop. So if you're having any difficulties and you can just copy and paste your vote or your link into a Google Chrome browser, you may have some less difficulty.
I do want to say one thing to folks who are on the, I guess on the chat, just so folks know, all the folks here do have experience and have a lived experience and are skilled in terms of the work that they do and what they bring to the Pride board. Again, please, this is not a space for bullying or to speak ill of folks. I just want to make sure that that's out there. Just want to state that.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Majority of those votes are now closing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for full transparency so everyone can see. I just want to also clarify that there were advance votes that were directed for this vote. So the people who submitted a proxy on these matters for the election have already voted for them. So their proxy holder did not vote on their behalf. They voted for on their own behalf. So for Victor Perez Amando, 65 votes in favor. For Viviana, 59 votes in favor. Anmol, 63 votes in favor. Grant, 51 votes in favor. Leslie, 51 votes in favor. And Mariana, 56 votes in favor.
Thank you so much, Amanda. At this point in time, I want to congratulate each of the candidates for joining the board at Toronto Pride. I know that you'll be bringing a lot of your experience and all of your lived experience and skills, just because, you know, I just want to make sure that folks know that, onto the board. Folks need to understand that these are volunteer positions, and so folks are actually putting their whole heart and their life into this and are definitely voices throughout our communities. I want to say thank you to the selection committee. I want to say thank you to Amanda for the election, to helping out with the elections. I want to greatly apologize for not putting forward those motions. It's kind of weird when you have more than one screen in front of you. So I want to say thank you, folks, and each and every one of you are well deserved. Yeah. And so I'm going to move it just because you know what, I was about to leave, girl.
Hand back.
At this point in time, I'm going to be handing back the role of chair of the meeting back to Grant at this time. And again, congratulations, Grant.
Perfect. Thank you, Asma. Congratulations to my new colleagues on the board, and as well as one existing one for your re-election, and great job, Asma and Troy, who I know just was able to join now, for managing that process. Okay, we are at other business now, and so there is one item that was requested to be added to the agenda, the liberatory demands by queers in Palestine. So I will pass that over to Javier to speak to that, and then we can get into a discussion. I think you need to raise your hand so that Amanda can give you the capability to unmute. Oh, there you go.
Javier, go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find my screen here. So on November 24th, Pride Toronto made a statement, and folks here may have seen it on Instagram or Twitter. And this was in response to a November 16th town hall meeting where members asked Pride Toronto to endorse what are called the liberatory demands by queers in Palestine. And Pride Toronto made this statement. It failed to acknowledge Israel's ongoing genocide of Palestinians. In fact, it both cited it. It did demand a ceasefire, but that's about it. It neglected to address the use of pride imagery for pinkwashing Israeli apartheid. It did not mention ethnic cleansing, settler colonialism, or the criminalization of protest, as we're seeing happen now. So I just really wanted to bring to this board's attention and to our membership what the liberatory demand from queers in Palestine actually is, and if we as an organization are to actually recognize that Pride's roots lie in the risk taken by our queer and trans elders, and go beyond statements and letters and actively engage in decolonial and liberatory struggles. It's not enough for us to say TD does good stuff. for queers also, where do we go? It's not enough for us to say a ceasefire. It's not enough for us to wait until the membership shows and demonstrates and pushes us onto the right side of history. Pride Toronto actually does not have a good history when it comes to supporting Palestinians and queers in Palestine. If we remember in 2010, Pride Toronto actually banned queers against Israeli apartheid from marching in the Pride March. It only took a massive community outpouring so in order for Pride to reverse its statement. So I also just want to bring attention to one other thing that folks may or may not be aware of. It was exactly 33 years ago, 3 days and 33 years ago, that ACT UP New York disrupted a live CBS newscast, and they demanded the government fight AIDS, not Arabs, amidst the Gulf War. And they actually forced the show off the air. The night before that, on January 22nd, 1991, so literally 33 years ago, they engaged in multiple coordinated actions, including dropping banners in Grand Central Station demanding money for AIDS, not war. Just 2 days ago, ACT UP has now signed on to the liberatory demand by queers in Palestine. But not only that, it has announced its support for the global boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. And specifically, they say, and this is just the last sentence, our history motivates us as we choose to stand with Palestinians against a settler colonial state backed by the finances and brutality of the United States. We urge LGBTQ and Pride organizations to take a stand for human consciousness, support boycott, divestment, sanctions, and the liberatory demands by queers in Palestine. That's what I'm saying here. That's what I'm bringing up. I understand that it's too late for a motion to be in order, but I would like this to be a notice of a motion for our next meeting so that our members can actually vote and so that Pride can actually address the genocide of Palestinians.
Thank you, Javier. Are there any questions and comments or responses?
In the Q&A, Gary did say his hand is raised.
Yes, Gary, you're able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure again. I'm sorry about the technical stuff with this computer hookup. I don't know if it's a more general problem. I really strongly support what Javier just raised. I'm also involved in Queers for Palestine, as I was involved in the Simon & Cody Anti-Apartheid Committee and as a supporter of Queers against Israeli apartheid. I think it's really crucial. Like the world is in an emergency situation right now, and we can't ignore it. And it is a queer and trans issue. And this affects thousands of Palestinian queer people, trans people, and gender diverse people. They are being killed right now. So those people who want to somehow construct Israel as being a wonderful place for queers, it's not. I mean, same-sex marriage is not legal there. There are right-wing attacks on queer people all the time in the state of Israel, but somehow mainstream LGBT plus organizations, including ones in Canada that get funding from the Liberal government, which by the way, is directly involved and complicit in this genocide, including bombing a poor country called Yemen. It's quite amazing to me that Pride Toronto has not already signed the Queers in Palestine statement. More than 450 organizations, probably much more than that from around the world have. And it's absolutely crucial that Pride Toronto make it absolutely clear that as it eventually came to support Simon & Cody who was fighting racism and apartheid in South Africa, and the types of racism that existed towards Black people within the gay community. And just as we eventually came to support QAIA, at least on some levels, Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, that it's absolutely vital that Pride Toronto speak out against genocide. And it has to be named. It is genocide. Thousands and thousands, more than 30,000 people have been killed or under the rubble in Gaza right now. What is happening is devastating and disgusting, and it is a queer and trans issue. It is a pride issue. And if we try to ignore it, we're simply standing on the side of genocide and supporting Israeli militarism and apartheid, and also the Canadian government's direct involvement in that genocide. It gives money to the Israeli state. It is allowing arms to be sold to actually intensify the genocide. So I'm just making an appeal here for Pride members to actually make sure that the board of directors at its first and next meeting comes out in support of the liberatory demands from Queers for Palestine, and that is then brought to the next meeting of the membership as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Further questions, comments, responses? I will reiterate the position of the board that we are, of course, absolutely dismayed by the events in Palestine and Israel, and distressed, to say the least, about the rising number of deaths of innocent civilians in Gaza. And that is, again, why the board agreed to make a statement calling for the release of all hostages and people held without due process, and ultimately for a ceasefire in the region. I can continue to speak for myself as the board voted on this motion in the fall, that I stand by this statement.
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Thank you. There are two questions, and we have a little bit of time in other business. Quick question from Andy Klumpus. Pride has a significant amount of cash on hand, and outside of the grant repayment, it's continuing to make money each year. What's the long-term plan for using this surplus money? I think that's a great question for both Osmo and Kojo, so go for it.
Thank you, Andy. And again, one of the things, the biggest challenge that as event planning with Pride, the Pride celebration being a major part of our expenditure, having that reserve. So it's that monies that are there is what we're currently using to book all of our artists, book our stage, make all of those deposits. So that small amount, it appears as though it's a lot of money. But on the grand scheme of things, this is what is helping us to not have to dip into our surplus and line of credits. This is why we're going to continue to build on this. And this is something, Andy, I appreciate you as our past treasurer. This is something that you sort of were very instrumental in when you were in your term as treasurer, and we will continue. So our ultimate goal, and I think, I'm not sure if it was Anu or who asked that similar question. Our ultimate goal is to have 6 months operation. But again, working with Amit, we need to figure out where that 6 months lies. So it's like half of the year operating sort of in a reserve so that we can also tap in to investments. So yeah, so it may look as a lot, but I can assure you that it is not. And I do see my good friend and our finance manager, who is currently on a well-deserved vacation in India. I'm not sure what time it is, just popped in their head. So again, I really want to give a lot of shout out to Amit and the finance committee that continues to hold me accountable, to hold the board accountable, and to hold others accountable. And I see that Amit would love to chime in, and it would be nice to know what time it is for you, Amit.
It's almost 7:30, so I just speak with regarding the surplus fund. So we have a festival in the month of June, but our cash inflow is coming starting in month of April. So the majorly revenue is coming month of April to July. We are survived to August to March, almost 7 to 8 months without money. So whatever the surplus we have to meet out our administrative expenses, which is payroll, electricity, rent, and other marketing costs. So our cash burn almost is 180 to 200,000 per month. So if you make the calculation like 1.6 million, we are paying our pocket without earning any revenue. So that's why we are not touching our surplus fund to invest the money, because we have to meet out our regular expenses. If we have a surplus of that cash burns, we can invest that money for our future purpose, like which you are talking about. Like we have a surplus in July, but that surplus we are using August to March. After that, we don't have the surplus, because in that time we are in a break-even point. If we have such excess money after the break-even point, we can invest the money and we can earn some interest from that investment. But as per current situations, we are in break-even if we are talking about in terms of finance.
Thank you, Kojo and Amit, for your responses to that. Just acknowledging a message from Javier Padilla to confirm that the statement here is our notice of motion put forward for Pride Toronto to adopt the liberatory demands by peers in Palestine, and that this will be on the next agenda at the next membership meeting, and the Pride Board takes that under advisement. Next question, there are two more questions before we go to the adjournment motion. First from Michael, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Oritsowaini Akitiani Onofomi. The question is, what measure has Pride or will Pride implement to ensure that it has the financial resources to utilize efficiently and effectively in line with the organization mission and goals? I think that's a good question for Kojo, so I'll pass that over to you.
Thank you, Michael, for again, great question. And currently working with the board and the senior leadership team, this is where our head is. This is where we're heading. It's the financial sustainability of the organization is a key part. And when you look at our strategic plan, one of our pillars speak directly to that. We just went through a hiring process, and we were able to hire a new director of development that brings a lot of skills. But one of the things that I was very attracted to was their ability to not just rely on sponsorship and or government fund, but really to look, we're going to start to look at how can we diversify our income? How can we just not rely on two main sources of income? So that's something that we are going to be looking at. I think we all have seen the impact of COVID and what it has done to many organizations, including ours. The cost of everything that we do has gone up. Everything has gone up by, in some cases, like our insurance that went up over 300%. Our general just staging, marketing, everything that we do has gone up. So we're constantly having to be vigilant at our spending. So it's something that we're all watching. My board members do not sign off anything without doing their due diligence. I do not approve anything without doing due diligence. Amit do all of the checks and balance before. Our directors and managers are doing the same thing. So it's a team effort in terms of holding each other accountable, ultimately so that the community can benefit. But a big piece is really going to be looking at how we can diversify our income to really ensure that the financial sustainability of the organization can continue beyond, the next year and the year after, and we'll be able to see Pride Toronto as a long-term impact on our community.
Thank you, Kojo. I am cognizant of time. Ellen and Arthur, I just want to acknowledge that your hands are raised, but we are approaching 9:15. And so I would encourage you and others here in the meeting to please email board@pridetoronto.com or membership@pridetoronto.com if you have additional questions that you would like answered by the board. It being 9:09, I'm going to move to adjourn the meeting. May I have a mover and seconder? Robert Chevalier moves and Glenn Knight seconds. And I will pass it over to Amanda to conduct the vote.
Thank you. I've now launched that vote for the approval of the motion to adjourn the meeting. So it is live on your meeting portal. I just want to say as well, thank you on behalf of Get Quorum for allowing us to participate in your annual general meeting again this year. We do appreciate what you do for our community, and we're glad to be a part of it. Okay, that vote is going to close here in 5 seconds. And I'll just go ahead and share my screen for the last vote of the evening. There it is. Perfect. So for the motion to adjourn the 2023 Pride Toronto annual meeting, 39 votes in favor and 3 against.
Thank you, Amanda, with 39 in favor, 3 against. The meeting is adjourned. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you, staff, volunteers, for all of your support, the ASL interpreters, Get Quorum as well for making this meeting successful. Mahogany, a two-spirited people, the First Nations, for joining us and leading our opening ceremony. And last but not least, volunteers and members who continue to invest significant time, commitment, and ongoing engagement with Pride. We're not anywhere close to an organization we could be without the strength of your support. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the board, and look forward to seeing you over the coming months, and certainly at the Pride Festival, which is the last weekend in June, the long weekend prior to Canada Day. Excited to celebrate another Pride season with you. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night.